Hey, sweetheart. Your dad and I are keeping Thanksgiving quiet this year. Just us, Haley, and the boys. Hope you understand. I stared at the screen, the glow of my phone casting long shadows across my modern kitchen counter. The message didn't sting the way it might have once. There was no sudden drop in my stomach, no sharp inhale, just a slow exhale and a bitter curl of my lip. Not shock, just confirmation. They had erased me again. I sipped the last of my now cold coffee and reread the words more out of habit than disbelief. Haley and the boys. Of course. The centerpieces of every family gathering, every anecdote, every ounce of affection my parents had to offer. Outside Denver's early November wore its first light coat of snow. The streets below my high-rise condo glistened unbothered by the quiet storm rolling through my phone. I stood in the kitchen barefoot on the cool tile floor, the silence of the room pressing in. It wasn't uncomfortable, just hollow. I placed the phone down, walked toward the living room, and opened my laptop. The familiar whoosh of it waking up was oddly comforting. My desktop background showed the view from the deck of Hollow Pines Lodge, the property I closed on 6 weeks ago. The tall pines stretched toward a sky of soft gray, and the cabin's cedarwood exterior seemed to glow against the snow-dusted ground. A fortress of peace, far removed from the kind of curated chaos my family so proudly hosted every year. I double-clicked a folder labeled Operation Thanksgiving. Inside spreadsheets, RSVP lists a color-coded menu plan and a PDF mock-up of personalized welcome baskets. I scrolled through the names: Aunt Linda, Uncle George, Cousin Tasha, and her partner, even second cousins from my mom's side I hadn't seen in a decade. The yes column glowed green, the no column empty. There were no declines. And yet, not a single message from Susan or David. My parents. Not even a, "That looks lovely, sweetie," or a passive-aggressive, "We'll see." I sat down at the dining table, fingers gliding across the glass surface as I skimmed through final touches. The wine-tasting vendor had confirmed the delivery. I'd chosen a small batch vineyard in Palisade, one that infused their Merlot with hints of smoked cedar and blackcurrant. It was the kind of detail my mother would never have noticed, too busy discussing Haley's kitchen remodel or the twins' soccer tournaments. A flicker of memory surfaced: my college graduation. I had stood on that stage, my name called, with honors, my tassel flipped by a professor who told me your parents would be proud. They weren't there. A scheduling conflict, they said. Haley had a dance recital. I clicked over to the seating chart. 12 guest suites, all full, each name accompanied by a small note. Loves chamomile tea, brings guitar, allergic to pine nuts. These people weren't just guests. They were my people. The ones who showed up when it mattered. There was a rustle as I opened the next tab: catering confirmations. Chef Allen, a local culinary artist specializing in regional mountain cuisine, had sent over the finalized menu: roasted elk tenderloin, maple butter turkey, spiced cranberry chutney. Dishes made for gathering, for sharing. Dishes that didn't need an Instagram filter to be meaningful. My phone vibrated again. Another text from Mom. "Hope you're okay with this, sweetheart. We just need quiet this year." The irony made me laugh under my breath. For years I had tried to be the easy daughter, the one who didn't cause waves. I attended holidays alone when my last relationship ended. I skipped vacations when Haley needed the room. I sent birthday gifts no one acknowledged. But this year I'd stopped asking for a seat at their table. This year I'd built my own. I tapped the reply field, typed with steady fingers. "Sure, Mom. Enjoy your quiet Thanksgiving." No anger, no sarcasm, just the kind of response they could digest without guilt. Then I minimized the message and opened the final file in the folder: wine tasting order. Confirmed. As I hit send, I glanced back out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The mountains in the distance shimmered under the morning frost, still and silent. Somewhere out there, nestled in the trees, was a lodge they didn't even know existed yet. Some families fight over inheritance. I was never invited to that conversation. The words crossed my mind as the elevator doors opened with a quiet ding, revealing the familiar hallway lined with oil paintings and muted carpets. Geller and Smythe LLP hadn't changed in decades. Everything about the place whispered old money and old loyalties: mahogany walls, dark leather chairs, the faint scent of tobacco that clung to velvet drapes, despite a no-smoking policy. The reception desk sat empty as it often did, because no one was ever really waiting here, unless summoned. I adjusted my coat and walked down the corridor until I reached the glass-paneled door marked Martin Geller-esque. The brass nameplate gleamed polished to a shine that spoke of meticulous control. Just like him. He looked up as I knocked once and stepped inside. The same man I'd known since I was 8 when I first followed my parents into this office for a grown-up talk. Now, decades later, he hadn't aged as much as he had hardened. Still immaculately dressed, gray hair, neatly parted, wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. "Rachel," he said, rising from his chair. "It's been a while." I nodded and accepted the handshake. "It has." He gestured toward the worn leather seat across from him, and I lowered myself into it, legs crossed, gloves folded neatly in my lap. Outside, through the tall windows behind him, snow flurries whipped across the Denver skyline like tiny messengers of things unsaid. "I appreciate you coming in on short notice." He began tapping a manila folder on his desk. I nodded again, but said nothing. "Your parents have requested some revisions to their estate plan," he continued. "Nothing urgent or unusual, but legally we're required to notify all previously named heirs." I kept my expression neutral. "Previously named," he cleared his throat and slid the folder toward me. "In the 2015 version of the will, you were listed as co-heir to the Aspen property and the family trust. The new version doesn't include your name." I didn't reach for the folder. I didn't need to. The message had already been delivered clearly, quietly, without ceremony. I let the silence stretch between us until he added almost cautiously, "Your parents mentioned wanting to simplify things, consolidate the estate. They felt Haley with the boys and all would be better positioned to carry the family legacy I finished for him." My tone even. "Yes." He waited, no doubt expecting a flinch, an outburst, maybe even a demand for explanation. Instead, I leaned back in the chair and offered a faint smile. "I'm not surprised." His brow furrowed just slightly. "You're not. They've been writing me out of things for years, Mr. Geller. This is just the first time it's been notarized." He exhaled through his nose slowly. "You have the right to contest, of course, or request mediation." "I'm not interested." His silence said everything. Not confusion, curiosity. I could feel it in the way he studied me now, like trying to recalibrate an old client to a new blueprint. I glanced at the folder, then let my gaze drift toward the framed photograph behind him. My father's arm slung around Haley's shoulder during a ski trip. I wasn't in it. I'd taken the picture. There was a brief pull in my chest, but it didn't bloom into pain. Not this time. "Do you want to take a copy of the new terms?" he asked gently. "No need. They've already taken enough space in my life. I don't need more of their paperwork cluttering my desk." He offered a diplomatic nod, the kind only seasoned lawyers could manage without looking dismissive. "Understood." I stood. "Thank you for letting me know." As I reached for the door, he called after me, "Rachel, can I ask something personal?" I paused. "Are you really okay with this?" I turned back and met his gaze. "I'm not okay. I'm free." Outside, the wind hit my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk, but I barely felt it. My boots crunched against the frost as I walked toward the parking lot, each breath a puff of steam in the morning air. I remembered another cold day, my MBA graduation at Columbia. I stood alone in a navy cap and gown, scanning the crowd for my parents, only to get a text halfway through the ceremony. "Sorry, honey. Haley's recital ran late. We'll make it up to you." They never did. Back then, I waited. Back then, I gave them space to apologize, explain, show up. But I wasn't that version of Rachel anymore. I reached my car, started the engine, and sat still for a moment, hands on the wheel. I could have called Haley, could have confronted my parents, demanded a reason. Instead, I whispered to the quiet interior, "They can keep the house. I've built something better." An hour later, back in my condo, I opened my laptop. One click, and the lodge's security feed lit up the screen, 12 suites each, with flickering lights and warm cedar-toned interiors. A notification pinged at the top corner, "Delivery complete." Welcome baskets placed. On screen, a staff member straightened a ribbon, adjusted a basket tag. "Welcome home, Aunt Linda." I leaned back in my chair, warmth pooling in my chest, not from anger, not even vindication, just clarity. They had written me out. I had written myself in. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. The words echoed in my head as I stepped into the grand room at Hollow Pines Lodge. The sun was low over the Colorado mountains, casting long golden shadows across the timber beams and wide planked floors. The scent of pine cedar and firewood wrapped around me like a promise of warmth, of choice. I placed my phone on the counter and took one more look at the RSVP spreadsheet glowing on the tablet beside it. All green, all confirmed. Every suite booked, each room labeled with handwritten tags and ribboned welcome baskets that had taken me 2 weekends to assemble. Every detail, every candle wick and tea bag had been curated with love that had shown up when no one else did. I tapped Aunt Linda's name and hit call. "Rachel," she answered on the second ring, already breathless, as if she'd been expecting me all week. "I wanted to ask you something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" There was a pause, then a small laugh on her end. "Probably defrosting a turkey while George watches reruns of Jeopardy." "Why? What if I said I wanted you and Uncle George here at the lodge for the whole week?" Silence. Then a sound I hadn't expected. A quiet, choked breath. "You want us there?" I swallowed suddenly, unsure why the question surprised me. "Of course I do." I. Her voice cracked. "We'd love to," I thought. "I figured you'd be busy or with your parents." "They're doing their own thing this year," I said lightly. "I'm doing mine." Another silence. This one softer, deeper. Then she whispered, "You have no idea what that means to me." I smiled as I heard Uncle George in the background asking who was on the phone. Linda's voice lifted and she called out, "It's Rachel. She's inviting us to Colorado." I could hear the grin in his response. "Tell her we'll start packing tonight." By the time I hung up, my eyes stung more than I wanted to admit. I blinked them clear and opened my group text thread, "Cousins only. Rachel Thanksgiving. My lodge. All of you. No exceptions. You in." The responses came fast. "Tasha. Yes. Wait. You have a lodge?" "Also yes." "Jordan. Say less. I'll bring the fairy lights." "Leo. Already checking wine shipping options. This calls for Cabernet." "Nadia. We bringing kids or just grown-ups and mulled wine?" I laughed aloud, the kind of laugh that didn't catch in my throat. The kind I hadn't let out in months. By evening, flight confirmations began arriving. I assigned rooms with care. Tasha loved a bathtub view. Leo needed quiet for his photography edits. Jordan would want the room closest to the kitchen because he always raided the fridge at midnight. Even little Grace was coming with Aunt Rena. I added hot cocoa kits to her welcome basket. The main hallway glowed with low Edison lights. A fresh wreath of spruce and dried orange hung over the fireplace, and the long dining table was being custom-built to seat 20. I'd asked for reclaimed wood and stone inlay, something sturdy, something grounded, something that wouldn't buckle under years of memory-making. Outside snow had started to gather in flurries, covering the evergreens and blanketing the winding path up to the main lodge entrance. It was the kind of snow that muffled everything, that softened even the harshest noise, the kind of snow that made you whisper even indoors. I sat down by the front window, tea warming my palms. My eyes wandered to the distant peak, where every year families took their holiday photos in matching scarves. We'd never done that. My family, I mean. Not my real one. Just the people I was born into. A memory pulled at me, the Thanksgiving of 2015. I had arrived late after finishing a final paper for grad school. No one greeted me. The front door was unlocked, the table full. My place wasn't set. Mom had looked up from the kitchen and said, "We thought you weren't coming." Haley waved a drumstick like a baton and grinned. I ended up on the porch, balancing a paper plate on my knees while the cold crept under my coat, and the rest of them passed mashed potatoes like I didn't exist. This year there would be no porch, no paper plates. This year the table had been built for me, and the ones who always remembered I was there. I stood and walked to the central command tablet mounted near the kitchen. One by one I reviewed each checklist. Sleigh ride booked, snowshoe guide confirmed, evening movie schedule curated, staff scheduled and prepped, a lodge built to host 12, but filled with 1,000 small gestures of love. As I turned off the final tab, a notification blinked in the corner of my screen. New email, subject feature request, Denver Business Journal, women to watch. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I looked around the lodge one more time, the silence suddenly filled with the ghosts of laughter, not yet heard meals, not yet served stories, not yet shared. But they were coming. They were on their way. And every suite was claimed. Not a single space left for the ones who left me out. They wanted quiet. I gave them silence with reverb. The wind swept across the snow-draped meadow just beyond the lodge windows, soft and melodic like breath across a bottle's lip. Inside, the scent of cinnamon sticks simmering in cider drifted through the main hall, mingling with the sweetness of vanilla and the sharpness of fresh pine. The fireplace cracked in rhythm with the shuffle of boots at the entrance, as cousins spilled in laughing, tracking in powder, wrapped in scarves, all grinning like kids again. Hot cocoa bars to the right. I called, gesturing toward the long table draped in plaid lined with every topping imaginable: whipped cream, peppermint shavings, tiny marshmallows in glass jars. Uncle George was already sipping something dark and spiced, nodding to the music playing faintly from the lodge speakers, classic jazz with just enough sleigh bells to pass as festive. Tasha dropped her suitcase with a theatrical sigh. Okay, this place is illegal. Levels of cozy. Leo arrived behind her, his camera already slung around his neck. I haven't even unpacked, and I want to live here. I smiled, letting their energy wrap around me. One by one they arrived, breath fogging in the cold cheeks, pink arms full of wine bottles, snacks, even board games. Everyone was exactly where they were meant to be. Each guest had a welcome envelope waiting on the entryway table, handwritten in gold ink. Inside were their room keys, itinerary cards tied with twine, and a tiny pine cone ornament I'd made weeks ago while watching snow fall in silence. Linda's envelope had an extra note. Thank you for always showing up. By late afternoon, the lodge glowed from every corner. The kitchen buzzed with prep apple galettes cooling on wire racks, cranberry orange chutney simmering, and a slow-roasted pork shoulder basting under rosemary sprigs. The main room had transformed into a gathering space, flannel blankets over armchairs, trays of cider, and Tasha arranging candles into a perfect golden glow. The sleighs had just pulled up outside 2 horse-drawn carriages, their drivers in wool caps, the horses brushed and draped in jingle bells. Cousins bundled up and ran outside, boots thudding on the porch. I stood at the doorway watching as they clambered in, laughing arms linked, snow already falling thick around them. I reached for my phone out of habit, and that's when it lit up. Haley, hope you're okay by yourself. Want to FaceTime later? The message sat there bright against the dark background like a spark trying to catch in damp wood. I read it once, then again before letting a low laugh escape. Not bitter, just incredulous. By yourself. I glanced around. At Aunt Linda stirring cider in the kitchen, George tending the fire, Jordan teaching the younger cousins how to play chess on the stone hearth. Every couch was claimed, every conversation layered over another like music. I remembered another time not too many Thanksgivings ago when I had nervously asked if I could bring someone I'd just started dating to dinner. My mother's voice had gone cool tight. It's just, Haley gets sensitive when attention shifts. Maybe it's better if it's just family this year. I'd nodded then, too eager to please, too afraid to push back. He and I broke up not long after. Not because of the dinner, but it didn't help. Now the lodge brimmed with people who brought their partners, their kids, their full selves, and it only made the place warmer. I typed a reply and deleted it twice, then finally sent thanks Haley. I'm actually not alone. Hope you enjoy your quiet night. I slipped the phone into a drawer. The sleighs returned just before dusk, cheeks rosy, hands cold, hearts light. Everyone crowded into the dining room for the welcome dinner. Long wooden table, mason jars of mulled wine, bread baskets, laughter threading the room like garland. Linda raised her glass and the room followed. She looked at me then, around at the room of cousins, aunts, second cousins, partners, and chosen kin. This, she said, her voice thick. This is what they lost. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My smile said enough. So did the warmth that bloomed in my chest, familiar but not often felt. Then came a knock at the side entrance, soft but deliberate. A man with a beard and a messenger bag stepped in from the cold, shaking off snow from his shoulders. "Rachel Morgan," he asked, lifting a brow as his breath fogged the air. I stepped forward. "That's me." He unzipped the side of his coat, revealing a camera bag. "I'm Liam, the photographer." I extended my hand with a slow grin. "Let's make this unforgettable." This year I didn't carve a turkey. I carved out space for myself. The scent of maple glazed turkey drifted through the lodge like a hymn, rich, deep, nostalgic. Outside, snowflakes swirled beneath the balcony lights in slow, lazy spirals. Inside, everything glowed. The long harvest table stretched across the main hall, dressed in forest green runners, gilded candle holders, and arrangements of dried florals and pine cones. String lights hung above like golden constellations, and beneath them the people who had chosen me buzzed with anticipation and warmth. I stood at the edge of the dining room, taking it all in. Tasha was helping her daughter tie a napkin into a makeshift bow. Jordan and Leo were uncorking a bottle of Cabernet they'd brought from a California road trip. Aunt Rena scolded her husband for sneaking a roll before the prayer. Every chair was filled. Every voice had a place. It was Thanksgiving, but not the kind I'd grown up watching from the periphery. For years, I'd sat quietly in the background. I was always included on paper, but rarely embraced in practice. One Thanksgiving, I was asked to give up my seat at the main table so Haley's new in-laws could sit with the family. I ended up on a kitchen stool with my plate on my lap, smiling too much and saying too little. But not today. Today I stood at the head of a table built for belonging, not protocol. Chef Allen walked out from the kitchen, his apron dusted with flour, and gave me a thumbs up. The dishes were laid out like art: roasted turkey lacquered in maple and sage butter, truffle-stuffed mushrooms, cranberry brioche pudding, and roasted squash that looked too beautiful to eat. The fireplace crackled. Laughter rose in waves. I cleared my throat and gently tapped my spoon against a wine glass. Conversations quieted with the ease of true attention. I just wanted to say, I paused, glancing around the table at the faces I knew, the hands I'd held during funerals, weddings, awkward teenage years, and silent heartbreaks. Thank you. There was a hush, soft but full. This isn't the family I was born into, but it's the family I built. And every one of you showed up not out of duty, but out of love. Glasses clinked. Some held back tears. Others didn't try to. From the corner, the photographer captured the moment. No staging. No lighting tricks. Just real faces. Real connection. He moved quietly through the room, snapping Candid's kids sliding under the table, Linda reaching across to butter a roll for George Leo, adjusting the camera settings while pouring wine with one hand. He caught it all. It wasn't curated. It was ours. I stepped away briefly to check on dessert, which was warming in the oven, and as I did, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Haley, Mom's freaking out. People are posting. What is this? I stared at the screen for a moment. Not because I was surprised, but because the message was everything I'd expected it to be: self-centered, reactive, late. I typed 2 words. Rachel Thanksgiving. I hit send and tucked the phone away again, unnoticed by the joy around me. Later, after the meal had tapered into board games and wine refills, Aunt Linda opened her phone and grinned. "Let's post these," she said to the photographer already scrolling through his preview shots. One by one, the images began to go live. A carousel of warmth and light, cousins in knit sweaters holding cider mugs, children chasing each other across the snowy deck. The harvest table glowing under amber lights. Aunt Linda captioned her post, "A Thanksgiving to remember." "Thank you, Rachel, for showing us what showing up really means." Within minutes, the comments began to stack. "Wait, where is this? Why weren't Susan and David there? Rachel planned this incredible. This looks like a magazine shoot. Who needs Aspen?" I didn't refresh the screen. I didn't need to. Because this wasn't about them. It never really had been. I didn't tag anyone, but the ones who needed to see it did. The morning after Thanksgiving arrived like a sigh, slow, warm, and full of echoes. The lodge had settled into its quiet rhythm again, muffled by snow that had thickened overnight and blanketed the pine-lined world outside. Inside, it smelled like maple scones and the lingering sweetness of wine. A few cousins were still asleep. Others moved about with the hushed reverence of people who had laughed too hard the night before and wanted to preserve the magic just a little longer. I wrapped myself in a thick knit sweater, carried my mug of coffee to the window, and curled into the oversized armchair that faced the eastern slope. The sun was just beginning to slide over the mountains, its gold spilling slowly through frost-kissed branches. Steam rose from my mug in lazy spirals, mirroring the soft cloud of breath that fogged the glass every time I leaned forward. I opened my phone. 12 texts, 4 missed calls, all from my mother. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I tapped into the familiar blue and white swirl of Aunt Linda's Facebook feed. She'd posted the album late last night, sometime between the 4th round of Uno and Uncle George's impression of a grumpy mall Santa. The first photo was of the harvest table candles, glowing glasses raised, every smile genuine. The next, kids in the snow, someone mid-laugh, Leo balancing his camera on a tree branch to take a group shot. The caption read simply, "A Thanksgiving to remember. Thank you, Rachel, for showing us what love, real love, looks like." Below it, the comments were climbing. "This looks like a Hallmark movie set. Wait. Rachel planned all of this. Where are Susan and David? Why weren't they invited? How do I book this lodge?" Aunt Linda had replied graciously to some ignored others, but the thread was already taking a shape of its own. Friends from church, neighbors from my childhood street, even distant relatives who hadn't reached out in years were now asking questions. I took another sip of coffee and let it all settle around me. The questions weren't mine to answer. The silence wasn't mine to fill. Behind me, I heard soft steps. Rachel, Linda said, peeking into the living room, her phone in hand. "Have you seen the comments I've skimmed?" I said, not looking up. She chuckled, walking over. "I knew people would love it, but this is something else." She handed me her phone. A woman named Denise from my parents' golf club had commented, "Is Rachel hosting holidays now? We always assumed Haley was the organized one." I handed it back with a half smile. Funny how assumptions work. She raised her brow. Your mom's definitely seen it. I heard she called Rena last night asking if it was edited for effect. Edited, I laughed, setting down my mug. She thinks I photoshopped joy. Now Linda shook her head and squeezed my shoulder before heading toward the kitchen. Whatever it is, sweetheart, it's working. The morning moved slowly. Some cousins took a walk through the woods. Others lingered in pajamas with Coco and movie marathons. I spent most of it in the lodge office confirming cleanup details and organizing tomorrow's departure schedule. Then, sometime around noon, a new notification pinged in. Subject story idea. Denver Business Journal. I opened it. Hi Rachel, my name is Carla James and I'm a features writer for the DBJ. We've recently seen posts about your Thanksgiving retreat at Hollow Pines. We're profiling local women building community and legacy in new ways. Would you be open to a quick interview or photo feature? It would highlight your business and the story behind it. Let us know. Happy to work around your schedule. I stared at the screen. My lodge. My story. Not Haley's wedding. Not my parents' annual letter. Mine. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to. But part of me still feared how quickly it would shift. How fast they'd turn it into something small. Some footnote about how Haley inspired me, or we always knew Rachel would do something cute someday. As if I were still 12, still decorating cupcakes while they planned galas. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text. From Susan. What exactly are you trying to do? No greeting. No punctuation. Just the question. Flat defensive laced with something that felt like fear and insult wrapped in confusion. I stared at it. Then I flipped the phone over face down and let it rest on the table. The silence they wanted. This was it. Amplified. They always said I was dramatic, but they never asked why I was hurting. The fire in the lodge reading room crackled softly, casting flickers of amber light onto the exposed stone wall. I sat curled into one of the leather armchairs, mug of lukewarm tea in hand, the steam long gone but the scent of chamomile lingering. It was quiet. A gentle, earned quiet. The kind that settles in after the laughter has faded and the dishes are done, and the children have finally gone off to bed. My phone lit up on the side table. FaceTime Mom. I stared at the screen for a second too long. My first instinct was to ignore it. Let it ring out like all the other messages I'd silenced since the posts started spreading. But something in me, the part that was tired of leaving sentences unfinished, reached out and tapped, accept. Her face filled the screen. Tight smile. Pearls. Kitchen light too bright behind her. I could already tell she'd rehearsed this call. Rachel, sweetheart. I didn't respond. Just waited. She tried again. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I raised an eyebrow. You are. But I'm answering anyway. She blinked clearly, not expecting that. Behind her, I could see the corner of Dad's sweatered shoulder. He wasn't in the frame, but I knew he was listening. Silent. As always. I just wanted to check in, she said. Well, there's been a lot of chatter. People are asking questions. I just thought maybe we could have a conversation. You're having one now, I said, still calm. Her lips tightened. You didn't need to make a spectacle of Thanksgiving. If you wanted attention, I didn't do it for attention. Then why? She snapped, the mask slipping just a bit. Why this performance? You could have joined us at Christmas. I took a deep breath. You don't invite people you've already erased. Her face froze. I'm not trying to hurt you, I added. I just stopped pretending you didn't already hurt me. Rachel, that's not fair. We've always tried to be supportive. Just because Haley got priority, seating, emotional availability, financial help, birthday parties, room at the table, and space in your voice. I didn't raise mine. Sure. I remember. You've always been sensitive. No. I leaned forward, the fire casting light across my face. I've always been invisible. There's a difference. There was a pause. Long. Heavy. Her eyes flickered away from the screen for a moment, probably to gauge David's reaction, but he remained off camera. Unmoving. Muted both literally and figuratively. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said finally, voice quieter now. I smiled, sad, not smug, like when I gave the valedictorian speech and you left halfway through to get Haley to cheer practice. That was a scheduling issue. It was a choice. Her throat bobbed. "You never said you were upset?" "I did. You said I was being dramatic." We sat in silence for a beat. Then I added, "You know what the difference is between now and then?" She didn't answer. "I'm not asking you to understand anymore. I'm not waiting for you to notice. I'm not putting myself in your eye line hoping to be seen. I'm done performing for a role I was never cast in." "Rachel, stop," she whispered. "This isn't you. You don't know me," I said gently. "But the people at this lodge do. And they showed up." Another pause. "I didn't do this to you," I said, voice unwavering. "I did this for me." And with that, I ended the call. I sat for a moment, letting the screen go black in my hand. The room around me exhaled with me, the fire crackling its applause. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was clear. My tea was cold, but I finished it anyway. Then my phone pinged again. A new email. Subject, "Can we talk before this gets worse?" From Haley. I didn't open it. Not yet. I expected an apology. What I got was PR management. The cafe was small, tucked along a quiet stretch of road just outside Estes Park. Inside it smelled of cardamom and coffee, and the windows were fogged with the breath of warmth meeting winter. The booths were pine wood and hand-carved, everything cozy and curated, the kind of place where secrets felt muffled and safe. I had arrived early, chosen a corner booth facing the door, and wrapped my hands around a stoneware mug of black coffee. The snow was still falling soft, steady, a blanket rather than a storm. The town was still waking up, which made her entrance all the more deliberate. Haley stepped inside in a beige wool coat that swallowed her frame, her cheeks flushed not from cold, but from nerves and the effort of appearing unbothered. Her makeup was pristine, her hair too styled for a casual meetup, and her boots looked like they'd never touched actual snow. She spotted me and waved with a hesitant smile, the kind that asked for something before a word had even been spoken. I didn't wave back. "Hi," she said softly as she sat down across from me. She set her oversized purse next to her on the bench like it was a shield. "I'm not here to fight," she added quickly. "I just thought we could talk. Clear the air." I took a sip of coffee. She shifted in her seat. "This whole thing, it's blown up, hasn't it?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean Thanksgiving? Or the fact that Mom's social circle is in a mild panic?" Her smile tightened. "Look, I get it. You were hurt. But maybe we could have handled this more privately." I blinked. "Handled what exactly?" "This narrative," she said, gesturing vaguely. "People are starting to talk like Mom and Dad disowned you or something." "They didn't," I asked, tone neutral. Her jaw worked for a moment. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's not." She stared at the steam rising from her untouched tea, and for a moment I thought maybe there'd be a crack. But when she looked back up, her eyes were dry. Strategic. "I just don't want things to get worse," she said. "I know you're posting pictures and people are asking questions. So I figured if I came up here, we could talk first. Maybe plan what comes next." And there it was. "What are you planning to post next?" she asked. I leaned back. She wasn't here to apologize. She wasn't here to reconnect or reflect or ask how I'd been since being surgically removed from the family inheritance. She was here to protect the optics, I thought of what Aunt Linda once said after one of Haley's more public reinventions. Haley doesn't apologize, she rebrands. And here she was, in real time spinning. I looked her dead in the eye. I'm not planning anything. This isn't a campaign. It's my life. Haley's mouth tightened. Well, it's getting a lot of views. I'm aware. She laughed, forced. You always were good at being invisible. I guess now that people see you, it's a lot to take in. There it was again. The little jab. Dipped in sugar, delivered with a smile. I thought back to the startup pitch competition years ago. I'd shared an idea with her over drinks, something I'd been toying with for months, a microfinancing platform for local women-led businesses. A week later, she presented the concept with tweaks as her own. She won the grant. I clapped from the audience. You know, I said slowly, I used to think I needed your approval. That if you finally said I was impressive, maybe Mom and Dad would notice too. She frowned. That's not true. It is. I cut in. Not angry, just done. But I don't need that anymore. I don't need you to validate me. Haley opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the space. I need you, I said, rising from my seat and tossing a $5 bill onto the table to stay out of the way. I grabbed my coat and turned toward the door. The snow outside had thickened, swirling now like a veil. Behind me, Haley's voice rang out, too sharp, too desperate. Mom's scared. I paused. They're all watching us now, she added, her voice wobbling. I didn't look back. Because for the first time in years, I didn't owe her anything. For once, I didn't feel like an outsider looking in. I built the house. The common room at Hollow Pines glowed like a secret kept safe from the world. Golden string lights curved overhead like a constellation designed just for us. Firelight danced against the stone hearth, reflecting in half-full wine glasses and glinting off the small brass fireplace tools tucked neatly in their cradle. We were gathered around the low table, blanketed in dark linen stacked with aged cheeses, fig jam, and the last slices of cranberry tart. The lodge had softened with the night. Socks replaced boots. Cardigans draped shoulders, and pillows had been dragged closer to the fire in an unspoken decision to linger. This was not a party anymore. It was communion. Carla sat in a small armchair just outside the circle, her leather notebook open on her knee. She'd arrived discreetly that afternoon, camera in hand, notebook in the other. I introduced her only as a friend collecting stories. No one blinked. That's what this weekend had become, a mosaic of stories retold, reframed, reclaimed. Aunt Linda raised her glass first. Let's do something, she said. Each person shares one moment this week when they felt seen. The room murmured with agreement, smiles forming like early stars. Uncle George nodded at Linda to go first. She cleared her throat. That sleigh ride, she said. Wind in my face, snow in my boots. But I turned to look at George and he was laughing. I haven't heard that laugh since 2012. Her voice cracked softly. Thank you, Rachel. I nodded, heart swelling too full for words. Tasha went next. The welcome basket, she said. Mine had peppermint bark. Nobody remembers I love peppermint bark. She blinked fast. Except you. Jordan exhaled long and shaky. I almost didn't come, he admitted. I told myself work was too busy. But really, I was scared. Scared it wouldn't feel real. But then I saw you, Rachel, just standing in the kitchen with flour on your cheek, bossing Uncle George like a chef. And I thought, yeah, we're not broken, just misplaced. There was a quiet moment as everyone absorbed that. Then Leo, cradling his wine like a prayer, smiled. Mine was the group photo. Not because of the lighting, which was excellent, by the way, he added with a wink, but because no one was posing. You can't fake belonging like that. I looked around the room, faces I'd known all my life, but had never been given the space to hold. Here they bloomed. They hadn't come because they were guilted. They'd come because they were invited. My throat tightened as they turned to me. I guess my moment, I said, voice quiet, was when I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. A pause. I stopped waiting for their attention. I stopped waiting for a seat at the table. I built attention around what mattered. Around you. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was reverent. And then Carla spoke, her voice soft, deliberate. "Rachel," she said, lifting her eyes from her notebook, "I want to officially confirm you're being featured in the Women of Colorado Reshaping Legacy issue. We'll run the piece next month." Gasps and cheers burst around the circle. Tasha squealed. Jordan clapped his hands. Linda blinked tears and reached for mine. I smiled, not out of pride, but peace. Not because it would be printed, but because it had already been lived. Then in my lap, my phone lit up. Incoming call, Susan. I watched the screen buzz, her name bold and sterile against the warmth of this room. I didn't flinch, didn't reach. I let it ring. Then without ceremony, I powered the phone down and set it on the table beside the fig jam. You can't control the narrative forever. Eventually people read between the lines. The article went live at 7:02 a.m. sharp. I was still in bed, curled beneath a wool blanket, snow falling steadily beyond the lodge windows. The world outside was hushed as if holding its breath. My phone, however, buzzed with life. Carla had sent the link with a simple message. "It's up." I tapped the headline. "The Daughter They Forgot How One Woman Built Belonging from the Ground Up." There was no bitterness in the piece. No blame. Just truth, carefully told. Carla had captured it all, the cold message before Thanksgiving, the lodge, that blossomed in its absence, the joy of the people who gathered not out of duty, but love. She hadn't named my parents explicitly, but the absences were loud. Carla knew the real power of omission. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the words sink in like sunlight into cold skin. The comments began stacking before I even reached the end. What kind of parents don't invite their daughter to Thanksgiving? Rachel built something beautiful. Shame on the ones who made her feel small. I know this family. This explains a lot. Haley always made it about her. Rachel just made space. I set the mug down. There was no joy in the attention. Not really. Just a kind of satisfying silence. A calm reclamation. No shouting. No defense. Just clarity. By noon, the ripple effect had begun. Screenshots of Carla's article flooded my group chats. Friends from college messaged me. Old co-workers. Even one of Haley's former assistants anonymously wrote, "You deserved better." Always did. By 2 p.m., Haley's brand Instagram went quiet. No stories, no reels. Just an old post about wellness and family, now peppered with new comments asking, "Did you really leave your sister out? And do you think optics fix emotional neglect?" At 3:15 p.m., I received a forwarded email from a shared contact from MediaHaleyWorks.com to PressEmergeConference.org. Subject: Event, Withdrawal Notice. Due to unforeseen family circumstances and scheduling conflicts, Haley Morgan will not be speaking at the Emerge Women's Leadership Conference. We appreciate your understanding and look forward to future collaborations. A second cancellation followed an hour later, then a third. No apology, no ownership, just image control. I could almost hear Susan's voice in some glossy kitchen in Boulder, pacing in that way she did when the china cabinet needed to look centered before dinner guests arrived. I imagined David still saying nothing, pretending this would pass like a bad stock report. At 5:48 p.m., my phone rang. Susan Morgan. Again. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my travel folder and clicked confirm reservation on a chalet in Jackson Hole for New Year's Eve. A sprawling property built for snowshoe treks, roaring fires, and people who knew how to listen, not just speak. I'd booked it before. Quietly. I was just waiting for the right moment. Then I opened my messages and texted Linda. Rachel New Year's plan confirmed. This time, we take it to the mountains. I hit send and leaned back against the headboard. Outside, the snow kept falling, layer after layer, softly burying the version of the story they'd once controlled. She called me sweetheart. That used to work. It doesn't anymore. The fireplace crackled softly in the background, its low glow washing the lodge's living room in amber light. The cousins were off in their rooms packing for the next morning's departure, the night winding down with the hush of good things coming to a close. I sat alone on the long velvet couch, a throw blanket draped across my lap phone balanced in one hand, like it didn't weigh more than the entire history between us. The screen lit up again. FaceTime, Susan Morgan. I let it ring once, twice, then accepted. Her face appeared slightly off-center set against the backdrop of the kitchen I knew better than my own reflection. White granite counters, silver pendant lights, not a single dish out of place. Even through the phone it felt cold, staged. "Rachel," she said, breath quick. "Sweetheart." I said nothing. The word rolled off her tongue like an old song she hadn't realized I no longer listened to. Her smile was thin, trembling at the edges. Behind her, David hovered near the fridge hands in his pockets, gaze locked on something just out of frame. Always present, never participating. "I wanted to talk," she said. Not text, not email. "I thought maybe go ahead," I said, my voice even. "I saw the article." She exhaled sharply, then pressed her palm to her chest like that alone could soften her tone. "People are calling, messaging, judging me, judging us. You've turned them against me." I blinked once. "No," I said. "They just finally saw what I've lived through." Her jaw tightened. "You think this is fair? That one dinner, one event, and suddenly I'm a villain." "It wasn't one dinner," I said. "It was a lifetime of being pushed aside, forgotten, uninvited. One dinner just let other people see what I've seen since I was 10. She bristled. "We did our best. You know how hard it was raising two girls with such different personalities." "You mean one who needed everything and one who learned not to need anything?" She flinched. David shifted behind her but said nothing. "Of course. We weren't perfect." "No, you weren't," I interrupted softly. But perfection wasn't the ask. Presence was. Susan looked away, then back. "You think I meant to hurt you?" "No," I said. "But you didn't mean to protect me either. You didn't mean to love me loudly." And that silence was enough to make me feel like I didn't matter. Tears welled in her eyes, now catching the light from her sterile kitchen. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "You lost me a long time ago," I replied. "You just didn't notice." She bit her lip. "So what now? You're shutting us out." I shook my head. "I'm not shutting you out. I'm just not inviting pain in anymore." The silence that followed was deep, not dramatic. Just done. Her voice cracked. "I don't know what you want from me." "Nothing," I said. "That's the point." And then, for the first time in my life, I ended the call. I stared at the dark screen for a long moment, the reflection of the fire dancing across it. Then I went to my contacts list, scrolled to her name, Susan Morgan Mom, and removed it from favorites. A small act, but final. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. They said I was too quiet for the stage. Maybe they were just too loud to hear me. The ballroom in downtown Denver shimmered under golden chandeliers, casting warm halos over the rows of chairs slowly filling with women in suits, scarves, heels, boots, each one carrying her own story. The air buzzed with energy that wasn't loud but electric, like anticipation in the seconds before a curtain lifts. I stood just off stage, hands clasped loosely in front of me, the microphone waiting on a lacquered wooden podium a few feet ahead. I could hear Carla's voice carrying across the crowd as she introduced me. "Sometimes," she said, "we're told legacy is something we inherit. But sometimes legacy is something we write boldly, quietly, stubbornly, in the snow-covered corners of the Rockies." Please welcome a woman who didn't just build a lodge. She built a new definition of family. Rachel Morgan. Applause rose polite and curious. I stepped onto the stage. My heels echoed lightly against the floor as I approached the mic, heart steady. I didn't feel nervous. Not anymore. I felt known. Not by everyone, but by the ones who mattered. The ones who listened. I looked out into the crowd. Rows of faces, some eager, some tearful, some simply waiting. Somewhere out there behind a screen, I knew others were watching too. Haley, Susan, maybe even David, though I imagined him muted as always. I took a breath and spoke. When the people you love forget how to love you, you learn to remember yourself. The words didn't tremble. They didn't swell with emotion. They just stood, firm, like stones across a river. I used to think love was something you earned by being quiet, being helpful, being easy to ignore. I used to think family was defined by who fed you, who dressed you, who signed the field trip permission slips. But I've learned that family is who shows up when the doors are closed and no one's watching. I paused, scanning the room. This year, I built a place, not just a lodge, but a space for people to gather who'd spent years being quiet too. People who were tired of waiting for their place at someone else's table. So they came to mine. And we didn't just carve turkey. We carved out belonging. There was stillness. Then a quiet murmur, agreement, breath connection. I won't say names. I don't need to. Because this isn't about calling people out. It's about calling people in. To themselves. To their own power. To their own voice. I smiled and the lights glinted off the rings on my fingers, one I'd bought myself after buying the lodge. A promise. To never be small again. For those of you who have been made to feel too quiet, too much, too invisible, too late, remember this. You don't need permission to be seen. You only need truth. And that you already own. Silence stretched. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the room erupted. A standing ovation, not because I'd been loud, but because I'd said what too many of them hadn't found the words for yet. I nodded once, stepped back, and walked off the stage. Carla met me in the wings, tears in her eyes. That wasn't a speech, she whispered. That was reclamation. She uploaded the video less than 20 minutes later. By sunset, it had over 40,000 shares. My inbox flooded. Invitations, articles, podcasts, women from other towns, cities, countries, even writing. You spoke my story. I sat on a bench outside the hotel, coat wrapped tight around me, snow drifting again, the kind that didn't fall hard but fell constantly, insistently reshaping everything. My phone buzzed. Haley, I'm in town. Can we meet in person? I stared at the message. I didn't answer. Not yet. I just looked out at the snow and let it keep falling. She said she was coming to talk. I didn't expect honesty, and yet, the cabin sat just 10 minutes down the snowy road from Hollow Pines, but it felt a lifetime away. Smaller, more modest, its porch light flickered like a reluctant heartbeat. Snow fell quietly, blanketing the roof, muffling the world. I stood just inside the fire, already lit, and the air tinged with cedar and clove. Then came the sound of tires crunching outside a car door shutting. I didn't move. I didn't brace. I just waited. She knocked once. Then again, softer. When I opened the door, Haley stood there with a paper bag in one hand, her other tucked into the pocket of her tailored wool coat. Her makeup was minimal for once. Her eyes were red, though, whether from the wind or something else I couldn't tell. I brought cocoa, she said, lifting the bag like an offering. I stepped aside. She walked in cautiously, as though the floor might crack beneath her. I gestured to the small table near the fire, and she placed the bag down, carefully pulling out 2 thermoses and a box of shortbread cookies. Something about the gesture was almost childlike. We sat in silence for a moment, the fire filling the room with its soft, rhythmic crackle. I didn't come to fix it, she said at last. I don't think I can. I said nothing. She twisted the thermos in her hands. I didn't mean to take everything you know. The attention, the praise, the space. I just didn't know how to stop it once it started. Her voice was smaller than I remembered, less polished, more human. I think I was always afraid, she continued, that if I stopped being Haley, then no one would care. So I kept performing. And every time someone gave me something you wanted, I told myself it wasn't my fault. You were right, I said quietly. It wasn't. Not at first. She looked up, startled. But you learned the pattern, I added. And you chose to keep dancing to it. Her eyes shimmered. I didn't know how to step out of it. Neither did I said. So I built something else. Silence again. Not awkward. Not angry. Just honest. I read the article, she said after a long pause, and I watched the speech. You were breathtaking. I nodded once. I know. She let out a tiny laugh, not mocking, just surprised. I used to think you wanted to be me, she said. I used to think I needed to be you, I replied. So Mom and Dad would remember I was there. Her shoulders slumped. I'm sorry. I studied her face. There were no crocodile tears this time. No deflection. Just a woman stripped down to something raw. I forgive you, I said. Her breath caught. But that doesn't mean I forget, I added. Or return. Her lips parted, but I held up a hand. I'm not closing a door. I'm just choosing not to walk back through one that used to slam behind me. She stood slowly, collecting her bag and thermos. I thought maybe we'd start again, she said. Maybe one day, I replied. But not because we need to look healed for other people. Because we are. She nodded, eyes wet, but no longer leaking. Drive safe, I said. Haley lingered at the door, as if waiting for something, permission, invitation, or grace. I gave her none and all in the same breath. She stepped out into the snow, the wind catching the edges of her coat as she walked to her car. The headlights flared, then faded down the road. I stood in the doorway a moment longer, the chill of winter brushing my cheek like a reminder. Then quietly, I closed it. They didn't invite me for Christmas, and for once, I was relieved. Jackson Hole shimmered under a sky thick with stars and the hush of new snow. The chalet, nestled deep in the trees, glowed with warmth. Fairy lights twisted along the eaves, wreaths hung from cedar-framed windows, and wood smoke curled like ribbon into the frozen air. Pine trees stood heavy with snow like watchful sentries guarding a secret joy. Inside laughter threaded through every room. Aunt Linda was in the kitchen shouting playfully at George to stop eating the sugar cookies before the frosting went on. Tasha and Leo were debating whether the mulled wine was too clove-heavy. Children giggled by the back door where snow boots and damp mittens were scattered across the tiled floor like a trail of wonder. And me, I was standing in the loft above the living room, watching it all, this new tradition I hadn't inherited but built. It was Christmas Eve, and for the first time in a long time there was no performance, no tense obligation, no holding my breath under polite ceilings. Just joy. Earned. Unexpected. Real. Carla arrived just before dinner, bundled in a down coat and holding a wrapped rectangle under one arm. I come bearing journalism and sentiment, she declared, shaking off snow as she entered. And also, she added, holding up the rectangle, a little piece of immortality. She handed it to me with a grin. I tore away the wrapping. Inside was a crisp copy of Colorado Legacy, the winter edition. My face stared back, soft smile, Snowy Lodge in the background. The headline written in soft serif font, "The Woman Who Took the Scenic Route." 48,000 shares, Carla said, nodding. And climbing. I touched the edge of the cover, oddly still. It's beautiful, I said. But not as beautiful as this. I looked around at the cousins decorating pine cones with glitter glue, the kids making paper snowflakes on the floor, Linda slipping a star atop the tree, with George holding the ladder. Carla followed my gaze and nodded. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, she said. It's what you choose to keep. Later, after we'd eaten too much rosemary roasted lamb and watched the youngest cousins put on an impromptu nativity scene using dish towels and sock puppets, I stepped out onto the front porch for a moment of air. The snow was falling again softly, endlessly. The world looked like a painting. And then I saw it. A small package resting at the foot of the door. No label, no card, just a scarf. Folded neatly. Familiar. I stared at it for a long time. It was the scarf I had given my mother for Christmas when I was 15, woven by hand at a holiday fair, soft alpaca wool the color of cinnamon. I remembered saving up for it, choosing it carefully, wrapping it in tissue with shaky fingers. I remembered her polite thank you and how I never saw her wear it. Not once. And now it sat here years later, returned to me in silence. No apology, no explanation, just gesture. I picked it up slowly, running my hands over the fibers, surprised at how little it weighed, how small it felt now. Then, without a word, I walked to the yard, where the children had built snowmen in crooked rows, scarves and hats already draped over them in clumsy joy. I chose the smallest one, built by Grace and Leo's twins, a little lopsided with one button eye and a crooked grin. I wrapped the scarf around its neck, gently tying it once. Then I stepped back. I didn't cry. Not really. Just smiled, tears in my eyes, but not falling as warmth met cold, and the past at last stayed where it belonged. Let the past stay cold, I whispered, laughing quietly, and behind me the chalet glowed on, full of light, full of life. They asked me once what I wanted from them. It was never an apology. It was acknowledgement. January 1st dawned slow and silver. The sky was a quiet watercolor of mist and light, brushing the tops of the Teton Range like a promise whispered just loud enough to hear. I stood barefoot on the balcony of the chalet, a wool blanket wrapped around my shoulders, coffee warming both palms. Below me, the snow-covered world waited, unbothered, unapologetic. It was the first day of a new year, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I had to outrun the past. Inside, the hum of laughter stirred from the kitchen, Tasha scolding Leo for using whipped cream instead of butter on toast, one of the kids asking if marshmallows were allowed at breakfast. Linda was probably organizing something without permission, and George would be pretending not to mind. I smiled, letting the comfort of their presence settle around me without needing to be in it just yet. My phone buzzed. Carla. We did it. 103K reads. Your story has legs and wings. I replied with a simple heart, then turned my attention back to the mountains. They were draped in fog like a secret I didn't need to uncover. I'd spent so many years trying to be heard, trying to get a response that felt like love. What I'd really needed all along was quiet enough to hear my own voice. A sliding door opened behind me. Linda stepped onto the balcony, steaming mug in hand. Her cheeks were pink from the kitchen heat, her gray-streaked hair tucked into a braid that reminded me of childhood. They'll reach out again, she said, without preamble, standing beside me, her tone soft but unwavering. You know they will. I know, I said. She looked at me, eyebrow raised. And I won't answer, I said. Not out of spite. Just because I don't have space for it anymore. Linda nodded approvingly. This isn't revenge? No, I agreed. This is renovation. We stood in companionable silence for a moment longer. Then she patted my arm once, the way only someone who truly knows you can, and disappeared back inside, leaving me alone again with the mountains. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Then came another buzz. Susan. I'm sorry. I should have said this sooner. I stared at the message. No punctuation, no details. Just those 9 words. Not angry, not cold. Just late. And I felt it. Not a sting, not a surge. Just the soft, settling weight of something no longer needed. I hovered my thumb over the message. Then deleted it. not as an act of war, but as an act of peace. I didn't need her words anymore, because I had my own. I lifted my mug toward the mountains, the light breaking across the snow like a blessing only meant for those who paid attention. To those who show up, I whispered, even if it's just you for yourself. And with that, I turned back toward the door, toward the laughter, toward the life I had built, toward myself. For years, Rachel was treated as a shadow in her own family, quiet, overlooked, convenient to ignore. But when silence no longer served her, she rebuilt her world with deliberate love and unshakable clarity. Justice didn't come in the form of revenge, but through recognition, visibility, and the choice to no longer chase approval. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Perhaps the boldest act of all is not fighting for a seat at the table, but building one where those who truly see you are already seated. If this story moved you, like, share and subscribe to follow more stories of truth and reclamation. Comment 1 if you felt seen. Comment 2 if you're still waiting for your own ending.